What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Buffalo Dash. As always, I'm Jason. He's Kieran. This is all things Colorado basketball. So I want to dive right into our first segment. Obviously, we didn't get the ASU game last week because of COVID cancellations, and that's been like the story of the ASU basketball program this whole entire year. And I kind of feel bad because I was really looking forward to that matchup, especially seeing Marie Martin versus McKinley. Arguably the two best point guards in the conference. But nevertheless, this team got more time to relax, kind of build up their strength going into this final big stretch of the season. And then Saturday comes and we have the home game against Arizona. And the first 10 minutes of the game, we're rocking. We're up 19-2, and then turned out to be an absolute nail biter, a 3-point game, which arguably shouldn't have been a 3-point game. But Kieran, I want to get your thoughts on what you liked in that game, what you didn't like, and what do you think this team can do to improve, and what you want to see in terms of what they come out tonight and how they play.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing for me is that I talked in the last show a lot about how the Buffs needed to just go back to playing fundamental basketball, like simple basketball. You know what I mean? And like between that and playing four quarters, like being able to hustle, were the two biggest things for me in terms of just and they sound so basic, but it was really what the Buffs were lacking the most in terms of, So to see them at the very least be able to step it up in that regard was, I thought, enormous. Because it showed to me that like they obviously saw a similar thing when looking at the tape, looking at film and stuff, and were able to sort of like overall dial it back to just playing a more like sort of fundamental sound game of basketball that was successful for them through the beginning of the season thus far. And then they seem to have sort of lost, like during the trip to Washington, then, with the Utah loss as well. And so it was, certainly something that I was concerned that they had, that they had lost altogether, or, had just like, they weren't realizing that was the issue that they needed to troubleshoot. And then sure enough, they came out and they, and they were just playing super sound. They were playing very stingy defense. And they didn't give up, through the four quarters of basketball. I mean, and ultimately it did come down to that fourth quarter, because we had a close game down to the wire. And so I thought that all that plus, I mean, Evan Batty, like he's just an absolute monster, was out muscling, I mean, just the dude was just an absolute force in the paint. And, he just showed how valuable he is to this CU team, really on both ends of the court. Certainly on the offensive end, though, getting a lot of boards, things like that. So, there's a lot of things like that, the seniors stepped up, the upperclassmen stepped up, and we played sound basketball, and ultimately it worked out and sort of looked more like the brand of basketball that we were seeing so much success from CU earlier in the year.
Yeah. I agree. I think this past game definitely showed me that this team was on the right path and they were getting back to the basketball that they were playing. My biggest thing for me was the foul trouble they got into, kind of halfway into that first half, and having to go that like 5-minute stretch to close out the half with, I don't want to say you're beat, but you're like you're not the people you best in the nation. And then they like went into a span where they were kind of iffy. And that final 3 minutes showed that, again, why being the best free throw shooting team in the nation helps. The fact that a big man like Evan Batty or Dallas Walton can consistently hit their free throws in clutch time, where you don't have to worry about, even if your inbound passes to that guy because you can get nowhere else in, he's going to sink both his free throws. So that's obviously super promising and super gives you a lot of confidence going down the road. But like I said, the foul trouble was something I was a little iffy on. I thought overall they played a better basketball game, but they still haven't gotten to the point where they're playing 40 minutes of complete basketball.
I think I agree. I think that, I mean, I certainly agree with the foul trouble. Here's the thing with so basketball is obviously it's a streaky game, right? It's a game that people who might watch lacrosse, watch any other sort of like high scoring, fast paced game, basketball. It's the kind of thing where teams get on momentum shifts. I mean, that's why you see teams call timeouts when they do. Oftentimes it's literally to just kill a momentum shift, things like that. And there was a period there where Arizona started chugging along I feel like on the back of those of that CU foul trouble, which was obviously like they were sensing the distress, on the Buffs end of things, having to, reach pretty deep into their bench in order to, keep guys from ending up, from not being able to play in the end of the game. But I mean, ultimately, and I mean, maybe it's just being a little bit too much of an optimist, but like for me, seeing, Dallas and Evan making free throws, for example, was the kind of thing that I was super excited to see, just because it's the sort of thing where those are the kind of guys who on other, like just sort of the centers and huge forwards like that, are usually the guys who are more likely to miss free throws. The Shaq equivalents, if you will. And I think it was, again, like a sort of a testament to the fact that this is an extremely well coached team who is very disciplined and has the means to be very disciplined, which obviously kind of contradicts the fact that they were had gotten into some foul trouble because but that, I would say, has been an issue for them consistently over the season. I would say that if tonight against Oregon State we see them have a similar sort of issue, I would say that, like, okay, well then now we've got a foul problem, but should that not be the case, I think it was a little bit of a one-off thing, and I think that, and that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And I think that they responded well to, the sort of the hole that they dug themselves with the foul trouble. And, I mean, I think sort of to your point, though, I will say that that's not the kind of thing that they can, while they're disciplined and, sort of, they're good shooting and stuff, sort of just in other areas of their play, made up for that foul trouble that they got themselves into against a more sort of against just honestly just a better team. You know what I mean? Against a better team, whether it's USC or somebody, USC or UCLA in the Pac-12 Pac-12 tournament, or whether it's Power 5 school, one of the top 25 teams in the country in in the big dance in March. It's the kind of thing that's like that, like getting into the foul trouble, things like that. Those are the kind of things that they are the reason why upsets happen. They are the reason why that, and so it just, CU needs to try to avoid that going forward, but I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. I'll definitely be interested to see what happens tonight, just because that Oregon State, while they are a decent team and are actually sixth in the conference standing wise, they're definitely, I want to say, not like a lesser opponent, but this is the type of game where CU goes out, much like the Cal game, and just kind of demolish them. Like, purely show that this team has the ability to put up, obscene amount of points and play staunch defense. And I think this game provides an opportunity, just because this team has 4 straight road games coming up against two of which are extremely big games against Stanford and Oregon. And road games are always difficult. You can't take the road game against Cal lightly, and then we play Oregon State again next week. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But like I said, I think this game provides this team like I don't want to say ultimatum, because I think the Arizona game was an ultimatum that, like, if you lost that game, like, I'd really be worried about this team. But they showed me that they can win, no matter what. But this is the game to really regain your confidence and really just kind of beat up on a guy. So, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think tonight, as we'll get into it in the last segment, what we want to see tonight, just, obviously the foul trouble and that kind of thing. But I kind of want to segue into our next topic. We kind of touched on it, but the importance of the seniors. We've kind of talked about, which type of, which guys were coming up big, but you can definitely tell, and like we're in the beginning of February. We're at the latter stage of the schedule. This team is still trying to kind of regain the confidence that they kind of lost with the Washington loss and the Utah loss. And if that Arizona game was any kind of significant or any kind of, I don't know what the word is, but if it showed us anything that McKinley and Evan and Jariah Horn, they have to be the guys that have to come up big and really just kind of will this team to the finish line.
I agree. I think that we've talked about the depth of this team, and what fortunately is pretty reliable depth. Like past the sixth man. I think we've got 7-8 guys that we can certainly rely on the floor at any given time. But I think what has certainly toward the end of the season started to differentiate itself is the fact that that experience from those seniors, having played at this level for a longer period of time, is truly sort of like what grounds CU, for lack of a better term. Like it's just sort of like a more consistent thing that the Buffs are able to rely on. Obviously we have a lot of like really like strong young talent, but it's strong young talent that doesn't always show up to play. And so I think that having the ability to rely on any of those guys to take late game shots, Eli Parquet, saving the Buffs, in the Arizona game from three and stuff like that, like being able to just rely on having the ball in experienced players' hands is truly sort of something that you can't really overstate. It's something that the Buffs are going to have to absolutely continue to rely on, and then as a result, those guys have to show up. Those guys have to keep themselves out of foul trouble. Those guys have to stay healthy because again, sort of look
on that floor. No matter even if he's not a part of the play, he consistently has a hand in everything going on. The guy, for a guy his size and a point guard, the fact that he is up there with the top rebounders on the team. Obviously his assists are record breaking, quite literally. But he's the guy who is just like, we haven't had the game this season where it's like he's taken over yet, and I feel like we're gonna get that eventually this season where he just kind of says, screw it, I'm taking this over by myself. I'm doing what I need to do to will this team over the line. But even without him doing that, like I said, he has a hand in everything. The guy played 39 minutes in the Arizona game, meaning he only sat for a minute. It's pretty incredible. That's a lot to ask of a guy for 40 minutes to play Division I level college basketball against an Arizona team against a team that's consistently good every year. That against a team that just kind of bullies you and gets every call their way, and that's when you really see a guy like I said, McKinley Wright and Jariah Horn understand that we got to play smart basketball. We can't be give it necessarily the fouls that are being called on us. We may not agree with them, but we have to understand that we got to stop this, and we have to play at our pace and play our basketball. And that's really what McKinley Wright did against Arizona. And Evan Batty, just an absolute warrior. The fact that he was 7-7 shooting his free throws, hit the four most important free throws in those final 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like me and you talked about, the fact that we're gonna have confidence that a big power forward like Evan Batty can make all his free throws. That's just a huge boost of confidence for this team. And the fact that he just for everything he's been through, the guy was hobbling at the end of that game, to step up and make 2 huge free throws. You can't ask much more from a guy, and it really shows that this team is invested, and when they play basic fundamental basketball, they have the ability to beat anybody in this nation.
Yeah, and I think that CU has a tendency, almost in some ways, to succumb to like playing to their opponent's level a little bit. You know what I mean? When they are playing the top teams in basketball, you know, like I almost have a little bit more faith in their ability to rise to that occasion. And then as a result, like on the contrary, when we're playing, you know, the likes of a Washington State or the likes of a Washington, you know what I mean? Like keeping those games, like they keep all the games close, even though they're keeping, games close with the team that with one team, like a Washington team that hadn't even won a game like in conference. And then like they're playing, tennis, like the likes of a Tennessee to within 10 points or so. It's the kind of thing where like they'll do that on either end of the spectrum. And so, I mean, that works in our favor in some ways, when it comes to, when it comes to later season playing against, even more powerful teams, because, clearly they've shown that they can step up and rise to that occasion against those teams. At the same time, that leaves them also particularly vulnerable to getting knocked out by a team that they have absolutely no business losing to, because again, they almost sort of like let off the gas a little bit against those teams rather than just getting up by 40 points on them and then like calling it a day. And so I think that, and that was, and I think that sort of, that showed particularly with that bit of a slump that they were in prior to this, sort of prior to the homestand that they're in right now, which is, they're on the West Coast. They had one bad loss. Then they had, a bad loss, obviously, at home against Utah here. And those, I feel like that was just part of like, they also played like, sort of the weakest section of their schedule during that time. And all of a sudden, then now as their schedule's starting to pick up again, they play in Arizona, then Cal, Oregon, then we've got, the LA schools back here at home. It's the kind of thing where, all those like playing against all those teams, I think that CU can continue to, keep up the level of play that they have. And so, that's an essential thing for them to be able to keep an eye on, though, because it really just is not like it while it allows you to beat great teams, losing to bad teams does not that doesn't counteract losing to bad teams. And the best teams in the country, the teams that actually do go out and win national championships and stuff, they're not leaving anything to chance against even decent teams, mediocre teams. And so CU really needs to sort of fully adopt that mentality for sure.
Yeah, I think kind of what happens now. A little bit looking ahead. I think we want to touch on obviously the game tonight, but going into the future. Tonight, for me, is a must win. There's no better feeling than ending a 5-game homestand that it didn't exactly go your way. You lost a bad game to Utah. You had one of your games canceled. You kind of squeaked out 2 wins against Washington and Arizona. This game against Oregon State is really your opportunity to finish the homestand not only on a high, but like I said, regain that confidence, kind of bully on a team, and then go into a really important 2 weeks where you got to play Stanford. That they're a good team. They gave us a run for our money last time. You got to take it to them. A Cal team that's been struggling of late, but it's also a road game. You never know. And then an Oregon team and an Oregon State team. 2 teams that you never know, especially with an Oregon, because they're an extremely good, talented squad. Now is your opportunity tonight to, like I said, really just implement yourself, kind of separate yourself from that middle of the pack, and kind of put yourself up with that USC, UCLA kind of caliber teams, who Colorado actually has a chance to overtake towards the end of the season, which is pretty crazy. But for me, this game is a must win, and if they don't win this game and then having to go 2 straight weeks on the road, it's going to be an interesting 2 weeks if they don't win this game.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that Oregon, Stanford, and Oregon State are, numbers 4, 5, and 6 in the standings for the Pac-12 right now. So CU sits at 30, behind both USC and UCLA, and then the next 3 schools are Stanford, or Oregon, Stanford, and Oregon State. All have 10 wins or more. have no more than 5 losses in conference. I mean, Oregon only has 3 losses in conference. So, I mean, it's the kind of thing that they, those are there is no understating sort of that. I mean, every conference game matters. I mean, honestly, like every conference game matters. And I mean, sure, like and as much as I'd like to say like, okay, and then there's the game, games against like some like if it were the likes of an Arizona State or a Washington or a Cal, as much as I'd like to be able to just like sort of write that up as like, oh yeah, those are those games. But like, I mean, we lost to Washington. Like we literally we cannot sort of we can't take anything for granted at this point. And if anything, it's an opportunity to prove to ourselves that these next games against teams that are more established do have the ability to make a splash. Playing good basketball against those teams is essential to sort of just not only building our resume going into the tournament, but also just building the team's confidence in their ability to be able to hang with anybody, on the basketball court. And so they do really need to practice just like playing top tier basketball against every single opponent they play, because that's the mentality you have to have in order to be successful in the postseason in basketball, because and in any sport really, but there's no second chances, you know what I mean? There's no series, there's nothing like that. And so, I mean, they really do have to show up.
Yeah, look, when it comes down to it, that like we've discussed that, while the loss to Washington and the loss to Utah don't look good, there's no sugarcoating that. This team is still ranked 17th in the net rankings and 18th in KenPom, which both could change after tonight's game. That this team is still in a good position to succeed, and they're still in a good position to be a high seed in the Pac-12 tournament. Which currently, if the season ended today, they'd be a 3rd seed and they'd get a first round bye, which is always crucial. We saw what happened last year when we didn't. We lost to Washington State and kind of that downfall of the team last year. But this is the time where you really want to pad that resume, and you really want to prove that you're a team to be messed with in March, and you want to get that 4 or 5 seed. This is the time where you can go 4-0 in a 2-week span of all away games. And like I said, even though there's a game against Cal and a game against Oregon State, like you said, any conference game is going to be tough, and any conference road game is going to be tough. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no other way to put it. That this is the time for this team to really show that we're the best in the Pac-12, that we deserve to be up there with the likes of USC and UCLA, because they definitely do, and they've proven it. They beat USC in the Galen Center, and we saw what happened, that USC thrashed UCLA last night, 2 nights ago. So this team can compete with the best of the best, and while they haven't looked like it the past 2 weeks, they're set up in a position to kind of regain that outlook and regain that look to the outside world of the Pac-12, that this team is for real.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that sitting in the number 3 position in the Pac-12, I think that sets us up for on whichever side of the bracket we're on. It sort of like sets us up for like within the Pac-12 championship, Pac-12 tournament, like a 2 seed. More or less, sort of within, if you think about it as, the 2 brackets broken down, right? And so, like 2 sides of the bracket. And so, that means that, like they'll be able to secure, a couple easier games for themselves for sure in those first few games. And then in all likelihood have to play, the likes of a UCLA or a USC in the Pac-12 tournament semifinals, and then the other one in the championship. And CU has no reason not to be in that game. Obviously there's all the possibility might not be, but there's no. I mean, they are absolutely capable of competing in that game, securing them, and by winning the Pac-12 championship, then securing themselves an even better seed perhaps come March. I mean, they'll definitely be in the tournament for sure, but it's got to be any like sort of edge for themselves that they can get. You know what I mean? Like any sort of like way that they can set themselves up and just to be a slightly more advantageous position come the postseason is essential, right? And I mean, you gotta work every advantage you possibly can, and so they have to, just adopt a sort of championship mentality now, and carry that not only through the rest of the regular season, which is obviously winding down a bit, but then certainly into the postseason, and that starts obviously solid win against Arizona, and that that same sort of play needs to absolutely needs to continue against Oregon State tonight, who is by no means a team that is an absolute win for the Buffs. And so, but I think if they can certainly get a convincing win against Oregon State, who is even above Arizona in the Pac-12 standings right now, it's the kind of thing that a convincing win against Oregon State would give me higher, just an even elevated level of confidence, certainly, going into these, going into then, their away stand, on the West Coast following this week.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens tonight. If this team can thoroughly beat a subpar opponent, and like I said, truly the thing to watch out for, like you stated, was will this team play down to the level of Oregon State? I'm not discrediting the level of Oregon State, and they're a good basketball team, and they're showing it by they're a game and a half within striking distance of us in the third spot. So obviously they're a decent team. They're going to be good. But there's no doubt that we have the high caliber of talent, and we have the high caliber of play, and we have the advantage of playing at home at altitude. We can't let this game slip away and play down to the opponent. I don't think they will. I truly think that tonight they're going to win. They're going to win convincingly, and I think they're going to give us some hope that in the weeks to come they're going to regain the form that they had been playing with. So. It's definitely an interesting thing to see, but only time will tell.
Yeah, and hopefully those as we said, those upperclassmen, certainly the seniors, the Evan Batty, the Dallas Walton, the sort of Jariah Horns, can sort of elevate lead by example by elevating the play of the rest of this team. Have the Jabari Walkers follow their lead. Obviously McKinley Wright's been doing that all season, but for him to sort of have some support in that regard, even juniors like Eli Parquet to for him to be able to step up and sort of just expect an elevated level of play out of their teammates, and certainly out of the young guys, is going to be essential for them sort of playing at their highest possible level. Obviously we know Ted Boyle's already instilled the discipline in them. At this point, they've proved it with their free throw percentage. And so if they can just, get a super solid, if they can get a convincing win tonight, I think that would be, really awesome to see.
Yep. It's going to be exciting to see. With that, Kieran and I want to thank you so much, like always, for coming to another episode of Buffalo Dash. Like we said, 5 o'clock our time. Colorado will tip off against Oregon State. I think it'll be on the Pac-12 network. So if you get it, you should watch it. Definitely going to be interesting matchup. See what happens. As always, follow the socials: Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram for Dash Sports. Check out the YouTube channel at Dash Sports TV. The website's dashsports.tv. Follow Kieran and I on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are under our faces. But with that, as always, thank you guys so much. Let's go Buffs.